Hello and welcome to End Goals, an LCMS Youth Ministry podcast. I'm host Reverend Mark Kiesling and I'm with DCE Julianna Schultz. We're here to bring parents, church workers, and lay leaders discussions and resources to help your youth ministry meet its end goal, which is young people who are disciples of Jesus Christ for life. Today we're going to talk about engaged parents as part of our 7 practices of healthy youth ministry.
We are continuing our series as we revisit each of the 7 practices of healthy youth ministry with practitioners who can help share what those practices look like active in congregations. Engaged parents is one of the practices that most youth leaders value, but may often have a hard time working towards. And that's not just youth leaders and parents that don't want to work well together. I think often they want to be on the same page. They want to be working together, but sometimes they have different expectations or goals for youth ministry. And it takes a lot of communication and effort on both sides to make sure that parents and youth leaders are on the same team.
And we know from God's Word and from our research that parents are the most important influence on the faith lives of young people. The role of parents is critical in modeling faith practices, showing how we prioritize faith in our lives, and engaging in faith conversation at home. God gave parents a unique vocation to help their child to mature in faith that will, God willing, last a lifetime.
We know that not every family is a husband and wife and 2.5 kids and a dog and a picket fence. I don't know. In our world, in our church, might find that there are a number of family systems that they're working with. And so when we talk about engaged parents, we both know that we have to meet our parents where they're at and lift up whoever has stepped into that vocation as parents for that child. So that might mean engaging grandparents, guardians, foster parents, and more. So as we talk about this, be sure that we are talking about a broader system as well.
Joining us today is Pastor Brian King and DCE Emily Schatz, who both serve at Lutheran Church of Webster Gardens in Missouri. Pastor King graduated with a bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan, go Blue, before going to seminary. He has served at Webster Gardens since 1998. He and his wife Liz have 2 kids. He has never seen a documentary he didn't like. I love that. DCE Emily Schatz graduated from Concordia University Chicago in 2016. She served in Washington and Colorado before joining the staff at Webster Gardens in 2021. Emily has focused on middle school and high school students in her congregations. Emily grew up in St. Louis and was excited to move back here with her husband and 3 daughters to be closer to her parents and extended family. Welcome to End Goals.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We're excited to be here.
Yeah.
So we get to hear about you briefly in those intros, but can you tell us more about your vocations, your roles in youth ministry, and other things that bring you joy?
First, you want me to go first?
Go for it, Emily.
Okay. So at Webster, I am in charge of high school and young adult ministry. Young adult ministry obviously can mean a lot of things, but at Webster, it's like graduated high school all the way through 25. I've been there for 3.5 years. I have an amazing team of volunteers, and I love getting to work with high schoolers. They're unique and they have good questions, and they have lots of stuff going on in their lives. And so just really, it's kind of the best thing is getting to go and meet them where they are. So I think some of the best parts of my job are like going to see them do plays or like go watch their games and stuff like that. So that brings me
You have a
joy.
very busy entertainment schedule.
I do have a very busy entertainment schedule. Also, my children are entertainment, so.
Oh, that's right. So I came in through the youth ministry game. I've been at Webster Gardens for 26 years.
Wow, awesome.
And I came in through a youth ministry door, and during that time, I transitioned, moved over to children's and family ministry, got ordained in the middle of that, and so now my title, like you said, is the pastor of family ministry, and so I get to work in the family ministry department, which is the best team to be at Webster Gardens, and that's with Emily doing high school and young adult, and we also have a part-time children's ministry coordinator, a child care coordinator, and then I still get to scratch my old youth ministry itch some by overseeing confirmation ministry.
Awesome.
Yeah. So 6th through 8th grade, and then there's a handoff transition that Emily and I have with our students as they go into 9th grade, and they're confirmed in the fall of 9th grade.
You're also going to the youth gathering, so that's kind of a big
fantastic.
youth gathering.
Oh yeah, she's my boss at the youth gathering. I'm going as a speaking
Yes,
of
I am.
how to engage parents. I'm going as a parent.
Okay, cool. All right. One of the things that we love to hear from youth ministry leaders is about their junior and senior high school years. Can you share for us how Jesus used a key moment or moments or people to keep or bring you close to him or the church?
Could I start with this one, Emily?
Yes, you can.
I just dusted off an old old. I'm old. VHS tape. Just that was in the collection, just to see like what was on it. You know, there's a handful of them in a Rubbermaid tub in our basement, and it was from an event from when I was in high school. My youth leaders took a group of us to a porn theater. Hang on, let me finish.
Okay.
It was a former porn theater in the city of Detroit, where I'm from the Detroit area, that had gotten turned into like a church and a mission in inner city Detroit. And me and a buddy, you know, I'm sure it was a big VHS camcorder, and we were interviewing the people who were, you know, part of this church and each other. And some of it was serious and some of it was silly. But it was just a reminder to me of how God surrounded me with leaders that would step out and do some things that were unconventional, some things that would, you know, hit us students in some different ways, that would challenge us, that would open our eyes to you know, just people in some different cultures that God loves, and use them to bless us and us to bless them. And so that was one little snapshot that I recently, like in the last couple of weeks, came upon. I've been thinking about that. So it's interesting that you asked that question, because I've thought about that theater and that experience. It was very cool.
Interesting.
So I was not super involved in my church in high school. Christina Stackle was actually my DCE growing up.
Yeah.
And she was wonderful, and she kept trying to pull me in, and I was just too cool for school. But
that really prepared you for youth ministry.
It did. I do think that my experience helped me at least understand some of the kids that just don't want to. Mm-hmm. And but I will say, Pastor Cassens, that confirmed me, always told me growing up, like, you're going to work in the church. And I would just be like, no, I'm not. And he would just tell me, Emily, I know you're going to work in the church. I don't know how, but I know you're going to work in the church. And I'd just be like, Pastor Cassens, I think you got it wrong. And now when I became a DCE, he, like the first time I went back home after that, he was like, what did I tell you all the time growing up? I was like, I know.
Do you know why he said that?
No, he said...
That's a homework assignment for you.
He always told me, he just said, like, you have leadership skills, and I just see you working in the church, and I never understood. I'm like, Pastor, I come to worship, and that's it. I don't know why you're... But God does crazy things. Yeah, so
does.
Love to hear those stories.
Speaking through people even before you knew it, right? Oh, great. So I can kind of hear it as you guys talk about your work, but what do you love about working with young people and their parents in your congregation and in your community?
That's a good question.
One thing that it's kind of like I don't know, I probably say it enough that it's a saying of mine or something, but sometimes I'll talk to parents and I'll say, you know what, I'm in family ministry, and so, you know, children's ministry is under that. And I like kids just fine, but I love parents. You know, as a parent myself, you know, I know the struggles and the insecurities and the promises of God that, you know, go over all of those things. And, you know, I just want to give every parent the hug that I feel like that I need too. And to, you know, and to give them encouragement and say, hey, don't give up. And it's, you know, it's sometimes it's awesome being a parent, and sometimes it's frustrating being a parent. Mm-hmm. It's joyful being a parent, and it's also scary. So that's just one thing that I love in family ministry is coming alongside parents and being able to do that's a real honor. Mm-hmm.
I would say, I think since becoming a parent, I love parents a lot more, because it's just kind of like, it's less intimidating. I don't know if intimidating is the right word.
Well, a lot of us get into youth ministry like before we're parents,
right?
Mm-hmm. And it's a different perspective then.
Yeah, and then you have kids, and you're like, oh, I get it now. They really want the best for their kid, and sometimes they, like, we're all just winging it. It's okay. We're all winging it. But I think that's what I appreciate. Like, parents want the best for their kids, and they want to be able to have these, like, conversations with their kids, and sometimes they just don't know where to start. And so I love partnering with parents just to learn and, you know, wing it together.
figure it out together. I love it. Be able to walk alongside them in those questions that come, and certainly experiences that come with this. And we know from Scripture and from our research that parents are the most influential, important models, and to mentor a young person's life in the faith. How do parents, do you think, help create a healthy youth ministry for their own children, and also maybe young people that they connect with at their home congregation?
I think when you have parent buy-in, that makes all the difference. Having parents be able to see the vision and see like the end game of what you want their students to graduate knowing, when they're on the same page as you, things go so great. Not that there's not like bumps along the way, but having parent buy-in is such a big thing.
And that's something that you really have to start
Early
on. So like Emily gets handed off the successes or failures of me in ministry or children's ministry. And so just normalizing the culture of parent involvement, that it's not that ministry to high school and younger isn't parents just drop your kids off and then pick them up in an hour after you've had your Bible study or after you've gone to coffee or after you've done your things. And so we try to cultivate that early. We have for us, we call it our faith path. Some people might call it their milestone ministry or mile marker ministry, that sort of a thing. Bringing parents together and for relationships with one another, just to be able to talk about how their how discipleship is going in their family and come alongside them. We stand parents up at their kids' baptisms, and we stand them up and pepper them with like these bold questions in front of everybody. Is this your intention that raise your child to worship and to pray and to know Scripture and serve and live a life that pleases God and all these things? And it would be pretty crummy for us to be like, okay, well, good luck with that. I baptize you in the name of the Father. But then what I like about some ways we do it at Webster Gardens, and we don't do these things perfectly, but that we bring those parents back around as their kids get older, and when we're teaching them about communion, we bring the families in there too, finding ways for parents to serve and lead and volunteer, and so in a way, Emily, you inherit a culture of either people who've we've communicated that to well, or that we haven't communicated that to well, and you probably see both of those kinds of families.
Well, youth ministry doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? It requires a whole congregation to be invested in some of those same ways and pushing in the same direction as youth ministry. I was really surprised. So we did a survey, maybe during COVID. We asked a question of youth leaders, like, what's the one thing you wish that you had? And one of the most prominent answers was, we wish we had more engaged parents. Right? That's something that we wanted to have, and it didn't mean that they didn't have engaged parents, but like parents, I think, particularly during COVID, really struggled with how they were engaging with your church and with your young person in their faith life. So what are some practical ways you guys have used to engage parents in your ministry?
We have a few different levels of involvement, I would say, for both middle school and high school. Like, I know that Pastor King does like kind of a survey with his parents of, what are things that they would like to do. For high school, like, we have parents that serve as small group leaders, where that's like a weekly commitment. We have parents that are willing to like drive kids anywhere, and they are a blessing. And
you got a good chunk going on the youth gathering too.
Yes, yeah. And parents that provide food, because high schoolers love to eat. I think
that's a team unto itself, right?
I think that our food budget has like tripled this year.
Can I jump in and say that your main lay ministry leader in the youth ministry department is a guy who he had kids who were in high school, and now they're out of high school, and he's a grandparent, and his grandkids are now involved in high school ministry, and so that he still does that too. You brought up Jenna, up grandparents, and how it's not just about the nuclear family, but it's intergenerational too, and that's very cool to see.
Are there ways in particular that you communicate to parents their value as a part of that ministry?
I think communicating with parents is honoring them in a way that I didn't understand before I was a parent. That letting them know like what's going on and why we're doing it and how they can be involved. But even just, hey, here's what's going on, and we're not just doing things to fill time, but we want to partner with you in discipleship. We want to honor you and your role as the primary teacher of the faith to your kids. I think about a family. This was years ago. When I was doing high school ministry. That before I had kids, and it was a blended family. So there were step siblings involved, and the complexities that go along with that. And at some point, I just remember that this family getting a little hot at me for not sharing some dates or some things that were coming up. And at the time, young, stupid me was like, come on, give me a break. But no, that was a big part of their lives. They wanted their kids to be connected into the church, and I wasn't honoring them by sharing things in a timely fashion or maybe kind of over communicating. And so sometimes it's just that first level of letting families know what's going on and why.
I think so too. Like with our faith path, we really start young. Like my family's about to go through the 2-year-old faith path when that comes up. I think that's in January.
That's right.
But like that conversation of like you as a parent are the biggest teacher really starts then, and I think it needs to start then, because if you're not building those habits as parents, it's harder as schedules get busier and kids start school and all those things. So getting in the habit of like knowing I, as a parent, am a very important role in the faith development of my child. It's not just I'm going to take him to church and they're going to teach him all the like morally correct things and they'll come out great. Like, no, you're a very important integral part of this process.
Yeah. Having parents serve together was something that I grew into appreciating. And so starting in like confirmation age, which for us is 6th grade, we have students sign up for a couple of ways for them to serve, usually on a Sunday morning. And that could be, acolyting or serving in the nursery or being on a hospitality team or a coffee serving team, those sorts of things. And for almost all of those, we don't have the family going up and lighting the candles with the student. Maybe we should, we don't. But in the nursery, that, a parent would serve with the student. And I love nothing more than on Sunday mornings to see and I'm just picturing a couple of these families in my head that are just on a monthly rotation, and they're just there at the front doors greeting, or at the front doors to the sanctuary greeting, and be able to answer questions about what's going on, and making those connections. It's just kind of that web of relationships just becomes so valuable. And then you see it kind of sneaking down to younger students too, and then the hope is that it's something that continues, because I see high school students who are standing there right at the stairs to the balcony with his name tag on and welcoming people up. And that's just a key way to engage and connect parents with their kids.
I don't want to put you too much on the spot. You're talking about this faith path that you have designed. Is that something that, like saying with a young child at 2, that you would be able to sit down with the parent and say, this is what this faith path looks like at Webster Gardens for your young person? And then as a parent too, is that something how it kind of plays out, that you have that detailed as kind of a plan of Christian education and connection to the congregation for families?
So in our a couple of ways to answer that question. One, if you look at on our website, if someone's looking and seeing, so what do you have for kids through teens, and there's and it lays out kind of that scope and sequence. Whenever we have like baptism prepreration class, and we get people of all ages, but generally it's people who are they're going to have their babies baptized. You get to cast a little vision to them beforehand, and going back to, because we'll run through those questions that we ask at baptism and say, and here's how we want to help support you. And we hope that you take advantage of that. You're a key member of this congregation, and you're 1-month-old is a key member of this congregation too, and we want to walk alongside you and not make you feel like you're facing this alone.
That's great.
Well, and I think there's something huge about helping parents see like this is hey what we're doing together, right? This is the goal that we have that's shared, that helps engage them and empower them to feel like they're a part of the ministry as well.
Yeah. And it helps that we give them food at these, get these
Sure.
like 3-week or so gatherings.
I mean, I think we tease that teens like food, but like I like food.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I'm all about a free meal.
Like, I was gonna say, I walk into
There's
many
food?
meetings and I'm looking
Okay.
for if there's coffee, food, something.
Right.
Yeah,
I was on the fence, but there's Jimmy John's? All right.
Well, we like to talk about parents being experts on their teens, their own kids. What are some of the ways parents can start to really understand their teens' gifts, skills, passions, or maybe who their teens are listening to, or maybe who are influencing them, especially as they're becoming maybe more independent into the high school years, and help them maybe stay attuned to that as parents?
This is funny. I'll just share. Do you know what I'm going to say?
Yes.
Before like an hour ago, Emily was in my office and talk turned to, it ended up developing into my just asking her to break down for me like the different music artists that kids are listening to these days. I'm like, Olivia Rodrigo, what's the deal? Dua Lipa. I know Taylor Swift, I know. And she's kind of ranking them, or I'm asking her to, and as a parent, and we weren't talking as colleagues, we were talking as a parent to an expert in youth culture, and that's really valuable for me.
It is. I think like you don't have to know. I feel like parents don't have to know everything, but it is helpful to. I mean, we all have the music that we like to listen to, but it is. I think it's important to at least know some of the music that they're listening to, if not knowing the artists that they like, just so you can kind of keep an eye on like the messages that they're being sent. I mean, there's a lot of things that sound really good, but then when you dig deeper into it, you're like, oh, maybe we should talk about that.
Yeah.
But I think that like knowing their gifts, I mean, like you said, parents are the experts. You know what your kids are good at. We have lots of kids that are great at music, so we help plug them in to worship. Whether that's, we got kids that play the trumpet and in the brass at 8:15, and then we got other kids that play the guitar or sing or whatever at our late like contemporary service. But even like kids that are really techie, we have them up in our sound booth and they're helping run the live stream, and I think there are so many gifts and talents that kids have that can also be shared within the congregation that we don't even know. And so just encouraging them to try things like, why don't you try, rehearsing with the band? And if you absolutely hate it, like, don't do it. But you might find that you really love playing on the worship, team or whatever. So I think just exploring and not putting a lot of pressure on like, oh, if I do this once, I have to do it for the rest of my life, as churches tend to do. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, going back kind of one topic ago of what you were talking about, Emily, about when we were just talking about like music artists and influences and things like that. I think part of family ministry is also kind of keeping a couple things in balance. One is, hey, be aware of what your students are watching, listening to, those sorts of things. Don't just give up on it because you're like, I don't know these platforms that my kids are watching things on, so like forget about it.
Yeah.
Know those things, but on the other hand, want to pull people away from the cliff a little bit too, of just freaking out about
for sure.
every single song or video clip and that sort of a thing, because there's a balance of those things, and parenting is so much about you may lose some battles to win the war, and that's there's wisdom that you seek from God, and He provides it from His Word. He provides that from other people who you're connected with, and so much of it comes back to just connecting with other families, other parents, students connecting with other students, and as possible, connecting with other good adults who will say the same things as their parents would say, maybe at a time that you're not going to hear it from your parents.
Yeah, right.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, a lot of those things just open up natural conversation of like, hey, what are you listening to? What did what did you like about this? What did you see in this? So yeah, We don't have to like go over the cliff.
Right. But to
be
normalize
aware.
those kind of natural conversations
Yeah.
that then can be connected into faith conversations too.
Yeah.
I think people would be surprised how if you genuinely ask a teen something about their world, they're usually pretty interested in telling you all the stuff that you don't know. I mean, that's like, usually that's a huge gift. So like being able to foster those conversations, I do think makes a really big difference.
Tell me about your sports. Tell me about the theater production that you're in. Tell me about the last movie that you saw.
Yeah. So how in particular might you connect or support with people who are filling that role of parent who maybe aren't, but families that maybe aren't in it, maybe a traditional family system, a more complicated family system in your church?
Yeah, some just key members of our team are in situations, like that, as a blended family or a single parent family, and I think just a sense of making them feel seen in terms of I lead a class on Sunday mornings called Adventures in Parenting, and it's for parents, and we'll go through. Sometimes we'll go through a book of scripture, and as we go through it, it's geared toward, hey, so how can you communicate this truth to your child? And sometimes it is specific, like parenting topics. We just did 5 love languages of children, and kind of camped out there a little bit, so families can kind of examine what's my child like, from my 3-year-old up to there's families of teenagers in this. But I think using illustrations where it's not just mom and dad together, because mom and dad might not be together, and that's common in our culture and in our church. And if we're reaching people outside of our church, then you're going to be reaching families that are like that. So I think just normalizing that conversation of that we want to say, here's God's design. God's design is for kids to for people to grow up, and then as possible, and get married and have kids if that's where God leads you, and that marriage is for life. But in reality, we serve broken people who are broken in all kinds of different ways, and that's one of those ways, and want to be able to disciple those families as well. So I think some of it is just the language that we use, and
I think just being aware of like situations, right? Like I have a lot of high schoolers that are with mom one weekend and with dad another week, and just being aware of like schedules, and practically, somebody asking like, oh, where's so and so? Like, oh, well, this isn't mom's week, so we're not going to see them. And being able to like still check in with that student, but just know that they're not here because they don't want to be. It's just their life and their schedule is just different. And or like maybe they're not coming to nighttime events because they're living with grandma, and grandma isn't able to drive at night. So I think just being aware and just being open to how you can help out those families. If we got a single mom and can't get one kid somewhere and another kid somewhere else, like is there a parent that's close by that could pick up one kid and bring them? So yeah, just being aware for some of those opportunities too. Yeah,
I mean, we have requirements in confirmation about about being in worship a certain number of times. For some students, 100% of the time means 50% of the time, because dad goes here and mom doesn't, or for some other reasons, and knowing that it's not just a cookie cutter, one size fits all kind of a thing, and to communicate that well.
You touched on a situation too, talking about other parents that help. We talk about as well as you've got parents of friends can become great mentors too, and to build those relationships. You talk about those relationships that sometimes those become these great mentors of the faith, that because they provide the ride or they might do whatever. Like what a beautiful way too to be able to build relationships with other supportive adults that yes are parents, but yet are not their parents, and so like how those can be wonderful connections too within the congregation.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
huge. Yeah, that's huge.
Yep.
What might be maybe what we might call hurdles that parents might have in connecting with youth ministry, or maybe even with their teens that you've maybe seen that parents either are coming to questions to you, or when you're in your class on Sunday mornings, like what are maybe some of those top ones that parents are asking with maybe have older kids, and where are they struggling maybe to connect with them or within the youth ministry of the congregation?
What's the first big one?
Schedules.
Yeah.
These kids are so busy, and it can be so easy to like become that.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the biggest hurdle is just we got sports or we got theater or we got both or we got something else. And I think people want to be involved. It's just not always possible with the schedules that we've built.
And it is easy, and I do this of just sort of throwing up my hands sometimes and saying, if it weren't for all those darn busy families, I mean that. But that's just not the culture that we live in. We're missionaries to a culture, and we do talk about that when kids are young, when families are young, or like in faith path or baptism class, saying there's lots of things you're going to pull on your family, and so what are priorities? What are your priorities going to be? Because what we want is for your child or your family to live life with Jesus, to live life for Jesus, and that doesn't just happen by accident. It does happen through the rhythms that we establish, the patterns and the habits that we establish. And I always want to be careful to not be a scold about it, but to not avoid it either, and say sometimes we're miserable because we haven't sat down and had a meal together as a family in so many days or so many weeks, because we're driving to this, we're staying for this, and all those sorts of things. And it is something that is definitely a way that the church is countercultural to suggest, hey, you know what? Less scheduling could be something that surprisingly benefits your family, your child's character, your child's happiness, being well adjusted.
I think one of the other hurdles we kind of talked about a little bit was technology. I think that it can be intimidating for some parents to like keep up with all the new apps that are coming out and all the social media stuff, and also just like we're all tempted. I know that I have also just like been on my phone and I'm like doom scrolling for a half an hour and like and now my 6-year-old needs to take a bath and I'm sitting here not paying attention
during the bath.
But I mean, everybody does it, and not saying it's good. Okay, it's not doom scroll, but that can become a hurdle of connection. I mean, it can be a hurdle to connect parent to parent. It can be a hurdle to connect parent to teen, and so I think just being aware of technology use.
Well, if parents were listening today, what encouragement would you give them about supporting their child's faith life?
I would go back to, and I think that maybe we've all said this in some different ways, but I think one of the most encouraging things for a family who wants to spiritually parent their kids is to develop relationships with other parents who have your back. It's really like this tribe of godparents in a way. They may not have been the ones that stood up at the baptism, but are the ones who can encourage you, or that you're trying to live a life with decisions that honor God, with the family schedule, with habits, with daily spiritual rhythms that you have. Have some other people who can encourage you and challenge you. I think it's one of the biggest things, and I'm speaking about that as definitely firsthand as a parent. The people that God surrounded me with as we've raised our kids has just been, I think, one of the biggest, just life-changing things about being a parent.
I would say too, creating a space for them to ask the questions and not worrying about what the question is and not worrying to have the answer, but just having the space to say, like, I don't know, let's figure it out together. Or maybe you do have the answer and you have an open conversation. But I was really blessed to have parents that we could go to them and ask any question, and sometimes they knew the answer and sometimes they didn't, and that's something that I'm striving for, and something I encourage our parents to do, is just be a space to have those questions. Hard, easy, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, great to have that space where that trust is. To have those conversations.
Yeah.
And if there were parents, or to any parents who are listening, one thing that I'd say is share the gospel with your kids. It is really easy to use the Bible as just a moral tool. There's lots of moral teaching in the Bible, but it can and there's wisdom to apply,
right.
Especially as students are getting older and more independent. And I mean, the book of Proverbs, just open it up at any page, and here's some great lessons for life. But these were written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and by believing have life in his name. Share the gospel. Let them know the freedom that they have in Jesus, the forgiveness that they have in him. He's not just God's not just a moral instructor, a cosmic sheriff, or any of those things. Just a lawgiver. He brings life to us, and so that kids hear about that full life, not just from their youth leaders, as they are doing here at Webster Gardens at least, but they're hearing it at home too. So stay strong, parents. Share the gospel, and know it for yourselves. Know the gospel for yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for being here and for sharing a little bit about how you engage parents and the engaged parents in your ministry.
This was fun. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We are thankful that Pastor King and Emily made the trip over here to the studio to do an in-person interview. Thankful for the ministry that takes place at Webster Gardens with parents, just walking with them, again, in those questions of faith as their young people develop, be able to resource them, and continue to instill in them and support them in that role of that amazing vocation of raising their children in the faith, to know Jesus, to be connected to his church, to be in his word, to receive his sacrament, to live as we are as God's forgiven children. It's such a beautiful thing that is.
Yeah, I appreciate that they bring up that if you want engaged parents in youth ministry, you need to be engaging parents from the beginning, right? From baptism, from children's ministry, and working. Not every church has as big a staff as they do, but certainly being able to work with other volunteers and as kids are younger to say, like, how are we all working together to make sure parents know how valuable their role is.
Absolutely. They said, I think, in one of the answers to their questions, and I know just being at that church before and walking through the halls and being at some of the events is the, I guess, encouragement for parents themselves to hear the gospel and to be in the word. And then through that, then God works as they then teach their children too. So to also take care of themselves and to be nurtured by God in that way as they grow as disciples of Jesus too.
Right. I mean, when we think about the 7 practices, that's one of those key points is that parents have to be worship, and they have to be in Bible study, and they have to have places where they are being fed in God's word and sacrament in order for them to be able to both model that and to be able to share that with their young people. So many important ways for us to be able to engage with parents as a part of healthy youth ministry. So a few closing questions for you to consider. First, how are you communicating with parents so that everyone feels like they're on the same team?
How can you create a welcoming environment for parents to share their questions, fears, and joys about parenting?
And finally, how do you encourage parents to find other adults, and particularly other parents, who can support them as their children grow? We will continue to keep you in our prayers, and as you pray for, communicate with, and support parents as they engage with your youth ministry and care well for the faith of their teens.
End Goals Podcast is a production of LCMS Youth Ministry and KFUO Radio. To find links mentioned in the episode or more about LCMS Youth Ministry, go to kfuo.org/youthministry and find resources for youth ministry at youthesource.com. Thank you for listening and caring for the young people of our church.